Welcome to the WellWoman Show, where we use intersectional feminism, mindfulness, leadership, and strategy to support smart women to change the world without anxiety, insecurity, and burnout. On the show, we challenge the status quo and support you to unlearn harmful messages that keep you playing small so you can activate your superpowers and live with joy, confidence, and ease. I'm your host, Giovanna Rossi. Hello, WellWomen. Giovanna here. So good to be back with you. I know that this year has started with a bang, and many of you are inundated in the sense that there's so much information coming at us in so many ways, right? There's everything that's happening politically. There's everything that's happening with our dreams and expectations and wanting to reset and power up for the new year, and all of the messages we're getting externally, and just all of the information we're taking in. So it's a lot. And I just want this time that you're listening to me and listening to my voice, whether you're exercising or doing the dishes or whatever you are doing, I want this to be a time for you to just take a break. Take a break from the constant questioning and overthinking and busyness of life. And just take a break with me. Let's just take a breath together and really ground ourselves in this space together. And something I want to share before I introduce the show for this week, which is super fun. I want to share this idea of being able to receive. And this came up in the WellWoman Academy this week. And so I just wanted to share it here because as women, as high-achieving professional women, we very often are moving so fast, right? Because we do a lot. Our output is so high that we rarely slow down to receive and accept the things that are offered or given to us. And what I mean by that is, when you find it hard to accept a compliment, when you brush off accomplishments, oh yeah, I did that thing, but it's no big deal. Those kinds of things, you are rejecting that gift, right? And so I want to support you to really be able to receive and accept and acknowledge and embody all of the wonderful accomplishments and celebrations that you deserve. And so the reason that I bring this up is because if we are going to grow and build this year and really fulfill our dreams, we have to do that from a place of fulfillment rather than from a place of deficit. And when we cannot accept and receive, then we can't build from there. So if we can't accept and receive what is already ours, then it's hard to build and grow from there, from that place of deficit. We're going to be talking a lot more about this in the WellWoman Academy, and maybe I'll do a whole show on it. But if this is resonating with you, if you want to hear more about this, I would love to hear from you. Just email me at info@wellwomanlife.com. I'd love to hear more from more of you about your experience with receiving and accepting and the challenges there. And yeah, let's make a commitment to spending time with those celebrations, whether they're small or big. And I had an experience recently where all in one day, I had about 8 things to celebrate. It was rather remarkable. And it really took a lot of it took a lot of energy, right? To like acknowledge each single individual item as its own celebration and its own wonderful thing. And if there are so many in one day and you want to spread them out, you can do that. Celebrate some of them today, save some for tomorrow. This is, saying you might have more, it might be that you have more than one big thing to celebrate. It might be celebrating the little things that seem little, but actually they deserve the time and space to really accept them and receive them. So that's just a little bit on that. And the other thing I wanted to mention before we go into the show is that we're working all of January on this theme of power and powering up for the year, for 2021. And so if you missed the show where I talked a lot about this, I think it was 234 show, you can go back there and you can get the workbook, the Power Up workbook. It's wellwomanlife.com/234 show. And that way you can follow along and do those practices and activities. Okay, so this week, I'm extending my conversation with Elizabeth Lesser, the author of Broken Open and Cassandra Speaks, and she's the co-founder of the Omega Institute and an amazing leader and teacher and spiritual feminist. And she and I on this show today are going to go through the WellWoman Life framework, which is so fun. Last week on the show, 235 show, was my interview with her. So if you haven't listened to that, you don't have to listen to that in order to listen to the one today. But if you want to go back and listen, that's at 235 show. But today we're going to go through the framework. So if those of you are familiar with that, if you've answered the 2-question quiz, you'll know what I'm talking about. If you haven't, you can head over to wellwomanlife.com/quiz. You can take the quiz yourself. It's really kind of cool. It's literally 2 questions that go so deep and it's so rich in terms of the findings, the answers to your questions, and how I analyze it and interpret it in this model, in this framework, that it's really fun. And I encourage you to do it, especially if you are listening to this today and want to relate to the conversation. So we'll put all these links in the show notes for you at today's show notes, which is 236 show. Okay, so here is my conversation with Elizabeth Lesser about the WellWoman Life framework. Okay, Elizabeth Lesser, I want to just do the WellWoman challenge with you. And so I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. You're going to answer, and then we'll talk about it. Does that sound good?
Fine, great.
Okay, the first question I have for you is, I want you to bring to mind a challenge that you're having in your life, in any area of your life that you want. And you can share that with me, or you can just keep it to yourself. Okay. And on a scale of 1 to 10, how are the external circumstances supporting you? Like external circumstances in your life supporting you to address that challenge? And you can just pick a number from 1 to 10, 1 being not at all, and 10 being like absolutely feel supported.
I would say the number one challenge for me is, how do I stay open in these super divided times to people who see the world differently from me, and not just the typical left-right kind of thing. But I'm finding I'm like super annoyed by people on all sides. Like my annoyance level can go to like freaking 100 within a second, whether it's a friend of mine who totally agrees with me usually, or the other political side of the spectrum. So the challenge for me is, how do I stay open and soft and ready to be that kind of change we're all yearning for? So how do I feel supported in the outside world?
Yeah, thinking about your external circumstances, whether that is your family, your home, your work, your book tour.
I feel very supported. So I'll give you a 9.
Okay. Looking at the internal now, thinking about the internal support and strengths that you have had or have, now or in the past, on a scale of 1 to 10, how are your internal supports working to support you?
They're working pretty well. As usual, I think I look more to the internal than the external. So I'm going to give it an 8.
Okay, so those are 2 really high numbers. And looking at the WellWoman framework, where we look at the intersection of the external and the internal, that would put you very high on the internal strengths and obviously very high on the external supports, which puts you right in kind of flow, right? Like in a very receptive place, in a place of flow, where you're really tapping into your strengths and also acknowledging and using the external circumstances. So when we're, and this is for listeners, when we're in this stage, I would argue that this is like where we're all trying to get to, right?
Well, I'd hope so. I'm 68 years old, and I've been a practitioner of spiritual practices my whole life, and I've run an organization. So man, I'd hope I'd be there by now.
But don't you think that we go in and out of that, even if we're really practiced?
Yeah, I think we do go in and out, but the only thing I've found different about this stage of life is that I go out and come back in much more quickly. I don't stay out. I'm super aware when I'm out. I don't like it. I know that it adds up to nothing and nowhere, and it's just going to create problems. So I'm just oh, whoops, don't want to be here. Going to go back to listening deeply within and trusting the universe without. Okay. Oh yeah, that feels better. Whew.
We'll be right back.
Join me on December 30th for my free year-end event inside the WellWoman Academy. It's at 12 o'clock Mountain, 2 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. UK time. And if you're a woman who needs to release 2020, that would be most of us, and really power up for 2021, then this is for you. At this event, we'll celebrate and release what we don't need anymore from 2020, and we'll reconnect to our superpowers, learn to turn our weaknesses into our strengths, and set our intentions for 2021. This is an assets-based process, recognizing our power and revealing possibilities for ourselves that we can't see through the fog right now. At the WellWoman Academy, we're breaking through barriers and creating the lives we truly desire with less anxiety and burnout. Head over to wellwomanlife.com/free event to register.
We're back on the WellWoman Show.
Yeah, I love that. And that is something that I think we're all, trying to achieve, right? Like shortening the gap between the annoyance and the response. And when we can, sometimes we can transition in a second, right? And then sometimes it takes 10 minutes or a day, and then you're suffering all of that.
And you've created this whole other world around it. Lots of other problems you got to clean up then. I mean, a day is good. Sometimes you've that shortened gap. I don't want to oversell my enlightened state here. My gap can be a couple of days.
Oh yeah, for sure. And depending on what the challenge is, the gap can be several months.
Oh yeah, years.
years or a lifetime. I mean, but certainly for myself, I experience this in all different ways, depending on what the challenge is. There's something in my life that I have been in hibernation with for a few months, and and it feels really hard. And I know when women ask me how can I get out of this stage and into flow? I need to get there faster. And usually the answer is, if you're asking that question, you're not ready, and there's other work that you need to do.
Yeah.
So thanks for going through this framework. So there's 4 stages of the framework, and I told you which one you landed in, which was not a surprise. But the others just are, if we're in flow and we stop doing the practices and start being complacent and stop the things that keep us in flow, right? then we tend to go into burnout where we can be overdoing it. And then after burnout, we kind of go into this stage of very quiet. I just called it hibernation, but really it's sort of a very quiet, sort of lingering space I describe, where we have to really tune in to the inner wisdom. And then after that, we can take action, aligned action, right? Not just any action. And so those are the stages. And I just wanted to share that with you as you are such a leader in this field. And I just wanted to ask you for any feedback or any insights about how I presented that.
I love it. I think it's probably so helpful to people. What I felt coming from you that I liked so much was none of those stages or states are wrong or bad. And we go in and out of them. I'm not someone who believes in an enlightenment plateau where you're forever free of it. Right. I have met from my work running a conference and retreat center for more than 40 years, like all the supposed masters and spiritual leaders and psychological thought leaders and just so many wonderful authors and people. And I really have never met someone who just has aced every one of those stations of the cross that you just mentioned, and who stays forever in the flow. And it's very unhelpful to think that that's where we're supposed to get and stay all the time. So I really like the way you framed that, and this sense of self-forgiveness and forgiveness of others as we move in and out.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. Thank you so much for being on the show. It's been such a pleasure.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for your questions. They're great.
That's it for our show today. Remember, if you need support to live your Well Woman life, head over to wellwomanlife.com/Facebook to join our community. As a reminder, we are on NPR every week, so be sure to tune in at npr.org/podcasts and search for The Well Woman Show. If you enjoyed today's show, please take a moment and subscribe and leave a review. This helps raise visibility, which is super helpful when it comes to producing the show every week. For feedback, comments, or just to let me know you were listening, find me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Well Woman Life. I'm Giovanna Rossi for The Well Woman Show. Until next time, have a super powerful week.